Let's get a legal take on this story now and go to speak to Rustom Tata, who is the chairman and the head of employment for the law firm DMH Stallard. Rustom, thank you very much. Now, I do want to put this to you. Dominic Raab is saying that he's had trial by media, so erroneous things were leaked out to the press for months before this. The HR guidance didn't apply to him, so no claims, he says, were put to him in writing. He says that he was told in person 4 times that he had a clean bill of health and that he only found out that there might not be everything rosy in the garden through informal tip-offs. If that was you or I, would we not maybe be looking at this now and thinking, is this unfair dismissal?
Well, good afternoon. I think that the fundamental issue here is that these sorts of complaints tend to sit and fester over a period of time. So whilst in an ideal world, one might say that as soon as something happens that an individual doesn't like, or maybe which is inappropriate by way of behaviour, is raised immediately and dealt with immediately. Unfortunately, my experience of many different workplaces is that it just doesn't happen like that. I think that's in a sense underpinning this point. I think it's probably only fair in the context of the report, which I have here as well.
Yeah.
Your headline-grabbing piece about snowflakes. It says there, the DPM, Mr. Raab, did not at any time suggest that any of the complaints were derived from a so-called snowflake quality or allege any of the individuals should be so regarded. What he did then go on to say, as reflected in the report, is it is a clash, or is a tension, perhaps, between a certain style of management and operation and perhaps where we've come to and what we expect for ourselves and for our families if we feel we're at the wrong end of things. So I think it's just which end of the telescope you look at this from.
I just wonder if at the moment there is too much emphasis put on subjective feelings. OK, so I completely admit that, you know, in the kind of industry that I operate in here, and no doubt you yourself as well, there can be very firm and frank exchanges of words under very highly pressurised, high-tempo situations, and people can be very blunt with each other. And that's not always OK, and that's not always that nice. And, you know, I accept that. I've done that in the past numerous times, OK, and people have done it to me. Is it really, though, fair to say that if somebody just feels a bit uncomfortable or belittled, just feels a bit uncomfortable and belittled, that is enough for somebody to have to resign over from a role as significant as Deputy Prime Minister?
I think individuals, and dare I say it, politicians more than anyone, will take a calculated decision about whether to resign or whether to tough it out. Obviously, the Deputy Prime Minister, former Deputy Prime Minister, took the view to tough it out to a point and has now decided to resign. I think from a general legal point of view, what hasn't been tested is, given the findings of Adam Tolley KC, whether or not the Prime Minister would have taken the view that the behaviour as found was such as should mean that he should determine that the minister should no longer continue in post. And there is obviously that fundamental difference that a minister effectively serves at the discretion of the Prime Minister. It is not employment. It is not subject to employment rights, as you flagged to earlier, and it's not subject to employment tribunal regulation. So there is a difference. I take your point that, you know, through one lens, he was a tough guy, strong views, wanted to push through certain reforms, civil servants not doing what he wanted. I mean, the finding was that he probably was abrasive rather than abusive. Yeah. So I think that's kind of probably fair to put. But, you know, in the not so recent past, you know, there have been other very senior politicians going against perhaps what officials might have suggested and recommended, and that hasn't necessarily always helped us as a country.
Look, yeah, Rustom, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated, as ever. Rustom Tata, though, is the chairman and head of employment at law firm DMH Stallard. Great to get that insight.